There's going to be a live-action remake of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Have you heard? It's not like Netflix has been pushing it hard or anything. Look, Netflix's Avatar: The Last Airbender is on a knife edge as far as I'm concerned. What I mean by that is that there is genuine potential for the show to do something really special here. I 100% believe that, and I'm going to explain what I mean. However, executing the potential is going to be immensely difficult and could easily come out disastrous. Everything rests on a very, very fine line that, well, I am a bit worried. But all television is about suspense, right? Waiting for this show to come out feels like waiting for a tightrope walker to begin their act. I'm excited, I'm terrified, I'm full of suspense. Maybe that's what they want.
I know. Set the net on fire.
So we're gonna get into it. Ready or not, here comes the train. The big question that is going to hang over this series, possibly for its entire run, is do we even need it?
Do we need them?
The original show is already fantastic, and I cannot overemphasize that fact. Beyond aesthetic differences and the desire for money, what grounds are there for this show? Especially when the original creators pulled out of the project. It would be very hard to argue this project is necessary by any stretch of the imagination, and I think all of us feel cautious at best and outright cynical towards the idea of a soulless cash grab at worst. With a lot of the shallow film and TV remakes we've got in recent years, it's easy to see why, but that doesn't necessarily mean this will be bad. Is there any hope for a show that, okay, won't surpass the original, but can certainly function as a good companion piece that can stand on its own feet and bring a new set of fans to the franchise? What could this show actually do differently? Well, one point is that the world of Avatar is vast. Since the show's original run, there have been books and all sorts of lore fleshed out, expanding what was already something really intriguing. Arguably, Avatar: The Last Airbender has my favourite world building from any story ever, not as detailed as a Tolkien or a George R.R. Martin, but really effective in what it does present. And with all of this lore expanded, there is a lot of space to explore that via a retelling of the original story. Pull in more of that stuff, pull it in a tighter way, especially when this show could be less restrained by the kid-friendly side of the cartoon. You know, we're not gonna get some dark and gritty Avatar here. I think the highly saturated colour of their costumes in the trailers says otherwise. They're still trying to incorporate humour.
You have me, Tara, and a flying ball of fur. What more do you need?
However, I do think you get a little more freedom to express, for example, the terror of the Fire Nation. I don't know if YouTube likes the word, so we'll just say the war crimes of their attack on the air temples. The original show does a really good job expressing the terror of the Fire Nation without it undermining the tone, and after ages of only hinting at Lord Ozai, when you finally meet him, my god is he imposing. And equally, the original show does a brilliant job exploring the effects of war on many different levels, but I think a Netflix live action show could have space to take all of that further if they know what they're doing. If. We'll come to the problems in a moment. On Fire Lord Ozai, it's interesting that we see him in the trailer for Season 1, just like we see his daughter Azula, two characters who don't really appear at all in Season 1 of the animated show, because the emphasis is on Zuko as the villain. That's an interesting change, which I think hints at the Netflix show wanting to explore the family situation of perhaps Zuko and Azula's sibling dynamic, or what it was like having Ozai as a dad and losing Ursa as a mother. If you know my channel, you'll know the potential to further explore family dynamics appeals to me. There is so much rich and raw emotion to mine there for good TV, and even the politics of the Fire Kingdom. How their nation functions, why is war happening, how it's been able to continue for so long. You never see huge amounts of that in the original show because the focus is on Team Avatar. So I don't know, I would assume from the trailer that there will be scenes cutting away from Aang to incorporate plot lines within the Fire Nation. So you could then do a lot more with the character of Admiral Zhao, who could be a little straightforward in the cartoon. I wouldn't be surprised if the White Lotus is established earlier on, if there are even new characters within the Fire Nation to paint in a more complex political landscape. There is potential for something different there. For me though, the most interesting thing to learn was that Season 1 will consist of only 8 episodes, each about an hour in length. Season 1 of the original show has 20 episodes, depending on how you count the two-parters, each about 20 to 25 minutes in length. For better or worse, that definitely means we're getting something different in a lot of big ways, because if you think about why the original show had lots of short episodes, beyond that just being the expectation for a Nickelodeon cartoon, it's because it means we get lots of fun time to sit with the characters as they are. Sometimes very dramatic moments, or moving ones, but sometimes important reminders that Aang and Katara and Sokka are basically kids, slowly travelling the world and trying to make sense of the war and who they are. There is great progression and arc throughout the series, but never at the expense of single episodic stories that get to explore isolated situations. You know, not only do all these episodes mean we get to see loads of different facets of the war, not only that, but you get space to breathe with the characters. How Aang feels when he's being treated like a celebrity, how Katara feels about that. You get nice little sibling tiffs between Sokka and Katara, you get Aang attempting to flirt.
So, papaya.
Uh-huh. Would you like some?
You know me. I don't really care what I eat.
Whatever it might be, that allows the show to feel like these are young human beings growing very organically over the course of the story. Not just growing in relation to the war and their bending and everything dramatic, but also growing in all the various ways kids do just grow and mature. I think all of that is important as to why we get invested in these characters and their adventures. Whereas 8 episodes, we're almost certainly going to get a high-paced show that is propelled forwards by its drama and encourages the sort of binging that Netflix loves best. For better or worse, that's different, and in my eyes that's good for an adaptation. We will still probably get a lot of the locations and plot points taken directly from the original show, but the completely different pacing is going to dramatically alter how they are explored. And on the positives column, yeah, that should make for a really engaging narrative that elevates the high world-saving stakes of the original to a much higher extreme. Aang, this kid who kinda wants to be a kid and to have fun and is daunted by his responsibility. Take that and really set it against this sheer weight of burden. Make it feel incredibly palpable, forever looming with a perhaps more terrifying version of the Fire Nation, and this underlying pace that keeps propelling Aang forwards even when he wants to resist. The conflict you can get out of that, you know, boom. That could be super compelling. If you are going to have scenes cutting away to the Fire Nation, you could even make use of the colour contrasts of the bright, airy scenes for Aang and then the darkness of the Fire Nation to hint at these two opposites slowly coming together for a clash. Paced well, I think that could be really tense. And similarly, I've got to be honest, I think the runtime of the original show does very often cause problems. It's perhaps the one thing that stops it from being a flawless TV show, in my opinion. This need to cram all these individual episodes into 20 or 25 minutes. That does mean certain aspects become a bit rushed. Particularly in the first season, where the episodes are at their most episodic. It always just felt like a shame to me that they never got an extra 5 minutes each episode to play with. And in that context, I think just taking the most impactful plot points from season 1, putting them into 8 episodes, but each 60 minutes in length, so you can really go to town on each of those arcs and plot points and make the absolute most of them. That could be really effective. You could end up with something laser-focused, driven, kind of a total opposite to the original show. Again, very similar plot and tone, but completely different pacing. I personally would much rather that than just doing the same thing again. But there are concerns, right? We need to discuss them. In fact, the biggest concern is that I haven't mentioned World Anvil yet.
Your destiny. This is incredible. You will be involved in a great
Subscription to
world
World...
Anvil.
Yeah, I knew that already. But did it say anything about a girl?
World Anvil! Yep, they sponsored this video, they're still here, hopefully they'll stay here. World Anvil is an online tool for building worlds, creating characters, designing and managing campaigns for a whole slew of games. Sleuth isn't the right word, I don't know why I said that. Look, you can do all that, you can plan and write stories, you can do all sorts of different stuff for creative projects. I use it for the world building of my novel because my old system of massive Word documents became far too chaotic. Not only does the ability to create timelines with hyperlinks branching off to specific characters or articles or a billion other things, not only does that make it so much easier to quickly find the information I need, it also makes it so much easier to plan things out and kind of keep going. Sometimes a blank Word document for world building is very daunting, so having all sorts of tools to help with visualization, to help you figure out what needs planning next, to keep your brain fizzing and unimpeded, because all of the tools are very straightforward and easy to use. That's really important to me. It's like the sharper an artist's pencils, the freer they are to focus on the art. World Anvil is a very sharp pencil. You can create mind maps, you can rearrange elements of your story, do all sorts of campaign related things for that sleuth of games I mentioned. Yes, link in the description and as a pinned comment should you desire a 51% discount on all their subscriptions, or if you're not yet sure, then try out the free version for as long as you like. That's what I did at first, and now look where I am, shouting their name at you through a screen. World Anvil! Firstly, what if showing more of the Fire Nation actually backfires and makes them feel less formidable, less threatening? Part of Firelord Ozai's weight in the show comes directly from how long it takes before we directly see him. It builds tension. But also it allows us to see Zuko as the villain at first. He is very much the main antagonist for Season 1, and I think it's the fact that he does begin feeling like a villain that makes slowly learning more about his past and who he is and who he could be. That's why that stuff is effective. It doesn't feel like a redemption arc unless he begins feeling like a villain, you know? So I think if we started out with a ton of focus on his backstory and his emotional conflict, then we could lose its power. There is a real danger to be concentrating too much on Zuko's past, or Iroh's past, or Azula, or Ozai, or any of that early on in this story. Secondly, yes, reducing everything to 8 episodes means there is a lot less space to just sit with these characters. You inevitably lose a lot of that, and if you're not careful, that means you could lose the heart of this show. Which, to mention fun just briefly, that is a core ingredient of the TV show. Moments like this make clear Netflix wants to keep that. But if you streamline the plot too much, ramp up the pacing and the tension and propel things forwards too quickly, a lot of the humour could start to feel less organic, more like it's just plonking in jokes or gags from the original rather than it being humour that comes naturally from the characters having space to have fun. If that makes sense. I think I've explained that well. Also, as a side point about humour, the original often goes for a slightly kiddish tone, which obviously makes sense for their target demographic, but it also reflected those characters. You know, even Azula was 14, she got her beachside party episode.
Yes! We defeated you for all time! You will never rise from the ashes of your shame and humiliation! Well, that was fun.
Whilst there are some occasions that style of humour didn't always land for me personally, it's still really effective and important to this show, I think. And my concern is how much harder it is to convey that when you can't draw on lots of cartoonish expressions and effects and sounds, because a lot of the humour in the animated show is delivered through all of that stuff. It's just really hard to translate that into live action. A lot more will depend on the cast's comedic acting ability itself, and that can be tricky. And in that sense, while this show is very unlikely to be super gritty, whilst that's clearly not what they've set out to do, I think if the fun of this show doesn't land, it could slowly derail into something a bit more like that. I should mention as well that I'm not exactly sold on the video effects. I think they look pretty good, but I also think it's just never going to be as expressive and creative as it can be in cartoon. If we're comparing the Netflix show to the M. Night Shyamalan movie, then yes, it looks amazing. if we're comparing it to the original show, it could feel faintly underwhelming. Which might not be a fair comparison, but still, I think it then means more responsibility for the story itself to be really good here, in order to make up for that slightly underwhelming feeling. Generally though, I think this show looks like it's doing the right things as far as we can tell so far. It's trying to keep a lot of the plot intact, trying to keep the core of the characters, the tone, the vibrant colour, the music, all of that is in line with the original. The main thing they are changing, I think, is the smart thing to change, which is the pacing and structure. This show needs to be different in some way, and I think that's the best way to adapt Avatar: The Last Airbender, because it means the original show's flaws could become this show's advantages. But at the same time, the original show's advantages could become this show's flaws, and depending on how well they balance that, we could either get a complete disaster, or what I'm expecting, something pretty good. That's all I'm hoping for, something pretty good. But it will take standing on a knife edge to pull it off, between darkness and fun, between pace and space to breathe, between more focused character exploration and letting them adventure organically. That's my opinion, but I don't know, what do you think? We'll see how wrong all our opinions become when the show is released, but until then, comment, like the video if you liked it, subscribe, maybe even support me on Patreon, but otherwise, hopefully see you next time. And as ever, a special thank you goes to Grace, Luke Orr, Treat Ukeba, Michael Gallagher, Flying Spider, Kellyanne Davidson, Samara Salsi, Joshua C. Follier and Chad Bramwell. Thank you.